Welcome to Season 2 of Common Time Podcast. I'm David Clemmer.
And I'm John Pasquale.
And we're back to inspire and empower music educators with practical advice, thought-provoking conversations, and stories from some of the best in the business. Let's dive into another incredible episode. Our guest today is Todd Dixon, and Todd is in his first year of retirement. First month, really. After 25 years of teaching, the last 14 as the director of bands and fine arts department chair at Wiley High School in Wiley, Texas. And Todd's one of my closest friends in the world. I'm so excited to have him on today. We're talking about empowering students in rehearsals. And John, why don't you get us started?
Indeed. Hello, Todd. It's so good to see you, buddy. How are you?
So good to see you guys.
So, Todd, I'm just going to dive in and talking about empowering students in rehearsal. Such an important topic. And I mean, seeing your rehearsals, you did this better than probably anyone that I've ever seen. So how do you encourage students to take ownership of their own learning during the rehearsal process?
You know, that's something that we're always looking for, but it starts really, really early. And I don't think it's not a thing you start just like, hey, tomorrow I'm going to start this, because it has to do with building a positive culture and relationship with not just the students, but everybody around you, from your staff to your students, to how you treat, your lesson staff, your administrators, pretty much your demeanor, your professional demeanor, all the time in front of the students. That leads into, how do we create culture? There's the whole thing about that, but it's just being on all the time and interested in the kids. I always kind of joke a little sometimes with other directors that are like, oh my gosh, I got this. I go, and they have all this stuff with kids. And I go, yeah, darn kids. Without them, we wouldn't have a job, number one. And they're pretty amazing. Any reaction from a kid is usually something that we put on ourselves, and they reacted from. Right. So to get into that area where they're comfortable talking, and I mean, you think back to yourself when you were that age, you just didn't want to say anything wrong. You didn't want to look dumb, right? And so there weren't a lot of, back when I was, a long time, last century, when I was in school, you just didn't want to say anything because you didn't want to say anything wrong. So this all comes from creating an environment where kids feel like they're valued and their opinion matters. So to get to that point is a pretty long conversation. I can go into a couple things on how we start our year. It's very intentional too. It's like super intentional. It's not like, oh, hey, we got there. Like, we talk about it in staff meetings. We model it for the kids. It has to do with no gotcha moments. It has to do with getting to know them. It has to do with everybody knowing them in a way that seems simple, but it's pretty deep.
Actually, yeah,
I think we need to dig into this, actually.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. We have a lineup of questions that may or may not even get to today, but you talked about culture. You said no gotcha. And, I've seen rehearsals where there's a lot of gotcha. And I've seen them be effective in terms of performance, but maybe that's obviously it's different I've seen your rehearsals. It's not the way you handle it. So talk to us about that culture that you've created.
Yeah, I think it starts, we start our academic year with, in Texas, summer marching band, right? So the biggest thing we've done, and I think I've gotten better at it over the years, and I think I was the best at it this year, and then I retired. So, go out on top. Simple things, like we send out a Google form and we want to know, simple things that we can relay to people. So like it was, and I make them do it in the Google form so I don't mess it up. Like, how many times, like, we have 300 kids, right? You're going to get a grade wrong or something wrong. So it's like their name, what grade they're in, their instrument. Then it dives just a little deeper into their favorite ice cream flavor, right? And then stuff like, if you, let's see, if you were to have a superpower, what would your superpower be? Mm-hmm. And then if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? Okay. So those first couple, those are like easy stuff. Like, everybody goes through those things. You get to the ice cream flavor, it's just a little fun. And some of them say ridiculous things, so it gets a little personality there. You get into the superpower. That is an interesting one. That is really interesting, because you have the people who want telekinesis. You want the people who like the ones that want mind reading. Those kids freak me out. Like, you don't want that. But and then you have the kids who want invisibility. I mean, it go and then you like I would. This is in a Google sheet, and so I would sort the results, and I'm like, yeah, like that's their personality. Okay, that's interesting.
Hmm.
And then the whole where do you travel? Oh my gosh, it just opens things up. Now, number one, it also gets them thinking outside of their town, thinking of things to want to do other than just summer band, right? All right, so that's what goes out. So then the first rehearsal of summer band, we don't do sectionals and stuff like that. Like we don't do like trumpet sectional. I've done this a long time, and I just want to do my band, because and I'll just be frank. I like my band the way I like my band, and we do certain structured things. And if I have them go with somebody else who's not part of our team and does exactly what we do for certain things, then I have them come back to my rehearsal and they're untrained, and
Right.
that might be anal retention. I don't think it is. I think it's just, I know how I want the kids to hold their instruments. I know because it's in a professional manner. We just want them to do the same kind of deal. So anyway, so summer band comes and first rehearsal, some of these things we kind of go through, like we'll take a break, and just kind of breathe and go, okay, hey, flutes, we're going to introduce you. And we'll just kind of go down the line and read off the answers, right? And they have to, with the top entities, they'll stand up and introduce themselves. And I'll say, do you want me to do it? You want to do it? Like there's a call. Now we're starting to have a conversation. And so, and we'll go through the next couple of days. Like we're not just going to sit there and do like we'll do a section before or after a break. And one time I forgot, and they're starting rehearsal, and they're like, I'm like, what? And they said, you haven't done the trombones. And I said, that's on purpose. And so, okay, so now we have some laughter, but we went through the trombones and it was fine. So now everybody, and some of the stuff is silly. Like when you say the ice cream flavor or the superpower and all this other stuff, and then you say, and who else likes this? And they're like, I do. Well, then we take it to the marching band because we've done it in our little rehearsals. And so now we're getting everybody together. So before every marching band rehearsal, and this takes a lot of commitment on the director's part, on my sheet that says what we're doing for the rehearsal, it always has a quote from a leadership person, and then it has like 3 or 4 people. And it just, everybody knows the questions. So it's just all answers like, so-and-so, sophomore, trumpet, vanilla, telekinesis, and, Baja or whatever.
Right.
And so now we're about to start rehearsal, and it becomes, hey, as you're going to this area, hey, let's everybody say hi to so-and-so. They're like, hey, so-and-so. And you go through this stuff and like, who else likes to go to Baja? And they're like, oh, Baja. So now we have this culture we're creating of, we're now just kind of coming together and getting to know each other in such a positive way, and that's how every rehearsal starts. Okay, so now the culture is, hey, we're all in here. We know what each other does. Nobody's anonymous. Fast forward, now we're in some rehearsals where we're talking about music. Well, now we've already set the landscape to where we're interacting all the time. I'm saying things, they're saying things. And so then it becomes, hey, and we never do open-ended questions. And we always start with our more mature players, the older kids who have done this before. And we'll stop and I'll say, Christy, hey, right there, tell me what you heard on the balance between the melody and non-melody. Just real easy stuff. And now we're starting like, okay, we're going to start doing stuff. Now, before that, we have a list of things that we, help them out with. We stole from David Brandon years ago, the rules of sound, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they all know those, and they're on the wall, and they're in their binders and stuff like that. But now all the other stuff is out of the way, even to where they get the rehearsal every day, even in the concert band. For the marching band, before we start rehearsal, 30 minutes before rehearsal, there's a text that goes on the band app, and it's the rehearsal for that morning or that evening, whatever it is, including all water breaks. And in summer band, including when the tubas wear their instruments and don't wear their instruments. I mean, drums,
Yeah.
like it has everything. So then they're like, and I'll mess up. And that's another thing that they're really comfortable with is, they know that we always start with, hey, none of us are perfect. We're going to all make mistakes and we need to learn how to forgive each other. Okay. And that's an intentional thing. So we've set this whole thing up to where now everything where they can get upset at as a kid is just gone. The only thing that's left is creating music.
Todd, I want to be in your band.
That's pretty genius. That is
It's
pretty
really
neat.
good. That's really good. Yeah. So you mentioned, I'd like to go a little bit toward, you said you use like more advanced students. Are you talking like student leadership? What role does student leadership play, I guess, in the rehearsal as far as creating
Yeah.
success there?
And for people watching this, I mean, this can go from all different size groups. We have 4 concert bands. So as we get into the younger bands, there's less student leadership, right? So we do lean on our student leadership quite a bit, and they know that going into it. But, let's say, we're in a top band rehearsal, then I'm probably starting to call on a section leader, okay, and ask them some questions about things. And again, calling them directly, not saying who, and hope, we've all, and sometimes I catch myself like, hey, who heard, never mind. Hey, Bobby, what did you hear right here? Okay. And we start with really simple things like the idea that a note starts, what was a note start? And this can be in daily drill stuff, especially in daily drill stuff, because all you have to do is worry about one note or a technical thing on a passage that might be unison. So starting with those section leaders, when you get into the lower bands, the younger bands, finding somebody who's been through that process. Don't start calling on freshmen. Just don't do it. They will leave a puddle every single time. It's just, they're so sweet and they want to please you so bad, and they want to be smart like the older kids. I mean, a lot of this is rooted in child psychology, but and then as it gets comfortable, then you find your top freshmen and start calling on them. Right. And I would go older people, leadership, mature players, and then the more mature freshmen. Like, I'm not just going down a list until you get a certain grade level, because then when you're asking a certain freshman that you know pretty much they're going to have the answer, or you can get it out of them.
Right.
Then you go back over to these, sophomore through seniors, and then they're like, yeah, I can answer this. So the whole thing is engagement. So now we're engaged in this process of understanding and answering. And then our job on the podium is just to be the pedagogue. Like, and the more you go, I mean, there's so much similarities in all the instruments that they can start answering the questions.
Right.
That is so important, to be able to empower students to be able to teach themselves, right? How do you involve students in decisions about repertoire or interpretation or the rehearsal process and pace? And if that you do that, how do you do that successfully?
Well, we'll start with repertoire. I'm a big believer in giving choices, because what I might like, they might not like. However, it's the choice that all are correct. Most years I'll send out a survey with a bunch of recordings, and it's things that I know that we have the players to do. Okay. And this is most every band. This isn't just the top band. Okay. Again, the idea of them showing up and having a piece of music and go, here we go. You want to have, it's almost like a trailer to a movie. Is you're sending out recordings. Now, will they all listen to them? No. But the ones who matter will, and it matters too, will. And then we go just, hey, rank this in your order of, how you liked it. Or, yes or no. Sometimes we'll listen to stuff in class and just be off the cuffs, because I think we need to listen to professional music in class, because the assumption that they're going to do it is not the case. Listen to a snippet and go here, here, or here. We ask them to close their eyes or put their heads down. And it's funny because like this thing might have this happen in trumpet part, and the trumpets are like
I know.
I mean,
Thumbs down.
hell
I
no.
can tell I have to work on that.
That's funny.
So from that, all the choices were correct. I'm not going to put out something that, number one, we can't do, and something that I don't like. It's just one of those things you throw out there and go, okay. And then they've had that input. And now when you go, okay, here's what your reaction to these. And then, you copy the music and there it is. And they get excited that way. And sometimes the ones who didn't like it initially, if we're picking quality music, once they understand the story behind the piece, or they get into it and hear more things that they didn't hear on the first time, you're doing things different in rehearsal and on the podium, and then this idea that we're going to talk about it all the time. Their story changes from, and how many times I think we've all had this, like, I didn't think I was going to like that piece, and it turned out that, like, oh my gosh, that was like my favorite thing ever.
That's absolutely true. I'm curious how we've talked about the conversations that happen between you asking a question and then the students giving feedback, that you kind of create that culture. But how do you create a space, or do you create a space where students are confident with peer-to-peer collaboration and learning from each other and fostering that type of environment?
Yeah, and I think they pick up on how we talk, but like I said at the beginning, how I present myself to every part of my environment. The kids, other teachers, administrators. I want that to be pretty consistent, not dull, not sterile, but things that I won't cross a line to, like, that's just who I am. We all have our friends that we can say things to, and then everybody else we don't, and you kind of train them on that stuff.
Yeah.
So and the respect that we have and how we create leaders through training and all that, it happens pretty naturally. Sometimes you have to take a kid aside and go, hey, your reaction to that, are you okay? I've this is kind of our trick. Steve, Mark, and I do it. Like, that's our way to de-escalate pretty much anything. And you can't come back to that. Like, hey, are you okay? And they're like, oh yeah. I go, okay, because this happened, and that seemed out of character.
Yep.
And that just brings it down. They're like, I just thought it would be funny. Off you go. But yeah, all of these things turn into a classroom where you're not having to manage classroom management. It's an environment that's open to a lot of stuff. Sometimes they share a little too much, but I'd rather and that's we're training them all the time for life on everything, and it's okay to have a conversation to say, hey, maybe that was more than we needed to know, but I appreciate you sharing.
Sure. That's funny.
So then, Todd, this kind of goes along with this, but in creating a safe space, which is kind of what you're in a sense talking about, being able to create a safe space where students feel confident in expressing those ideas or reactions, but also taking risks musically, because that's a vulnerable space to be in, right? So how do you foster that?
Yeah. So, all right, let me tell you. I'll tell you a little story. So every year, I play sleigh ride every year. The one year I didn't, I got hate mail. And so the kids know it, and it's great because that's not for us. It's for them. It's for the audience, and we should play more stuff. We need to educate the audience, and we need to entertain the audience, but that's a different discussion. Okay, so the idea of risk means that you're able to do something a little more, try something a little more. When we do sleigh ride, pretty much and the percussion is in a different class at this point. We don't have any percussion in there when we're rehearsing this. So everybody gets to play the sleigh bells. Well, they'll play the sleigh bell or the slapstick. And they know that, especially those older kids that have been in the top band, we're going to play sleigh ride. They're looking around, and I'm like, who wants it? And they're like, whoa. Okay. So what do we risk? They're playing an instrument they've never played before. And anybody who's even entertained the idea about playing sleigh bells know that it's against physics in time the whole time, right?
It's harder than it seems, for sure.
Right. And so they mess up. It's a grand time. But they're trying really hard, Same thing with the slapstick. Like, this has to go to here in a certain amount of time, and it's all, kind of stuff. So right. That's my way of just teaching to take a risk on something you don't know, right? The other is that when we're doing that, we also have other conductors. Like, I'm not on the podium. Like, I don't need it. It's in two, whatever. And we also play that at elementary schools. So I want them to get used to all sorts of weirdness on the podium. So now we have kids on different instruments, other directors on the podium. Like, you can't get more out of your space than that sometimes, especially the podium thing, because they all think that's pretty easy.
Right.
So now we've opened ourselves up. And I know years ago I was in a conducting symposium. Mallory Thompson she opened my eyes. She made me hug a tree, Yeah, you expose yourself so much by doing actual conducting on the podium. So, number one, I want to open myself up. I'm not just going to be here. I need them to open themselves up by just having ideas. And now we're in this space again. And I can say, hey, that's marked this. I'm not getting, are you getting that? It could be my listening environment, could be where I'm standing, but I'm not hearing the effect that I think needs to happen. What are you hearing? Oh man, now we just started a conversation. Most of the time, I'm like, no. I go, well, can you risk something? It's rehearsal. It's not going to be perfect. It will not be perfect today. It will not be perfect tomorrow. But we have to risk something so that we know physically how to do it. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it's something that you can do on the spot that one time. I think it has to be mindful from the director, and it's things that I do, like kids that have been in that top band for 3 years. They know what's coming, but they're only the third time. I'm like on the 28th time, right? So just getting them open to do different things is, I think, the way to do that. And then you can start any conversation of style, of crescendo, like how do we treat a day crescendo? What's the chord quality? How can we really improve risking opening up our tone because you're going to do something to your pitch, and that's okay.
I would also argue too, though, and how do you feel about this, about how the teacher reacts is critical.
Oh,
I mean, the power of positivity and encouragement, because if the students feel comfortable, and then we as the teacher come down and we say something harshly or tersely, or right, that could actually have the opposite effect, right?
Right. And you have to be real within your personality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to say, I still have to be me. So if something happens, I can go, they're like, what? I go, all right, did anybody else feel that? And we can have some humor in it. It can't just be, okay, well, you tried, and now let's, it has to be right, real within yourself. And however your personality is, I mean, I'll do whatever. I've been known to, jump off the podium, and, if something was startling, because everybody else heard it too, right? So there has to be some humor in that. It's not just we're not, the most analytical all the time, because we're asking them to try some stuff. And if it's funny, gosh, it's funny. Like, if they make a weird sound, that's funny. Let's address it for what it is, but correct it.
All of us, we teach all over the world, and we have actually together. What I've seen a lot, though, is teachers that are unintended, or it's unintended,
Unintentionally.
unintentional. Thank you. It's unintentionally condescending.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, haven't we all seen that, right? And so,
Yeah. Now that you say
anybody
it, yeah.
listening, I would really encourage you to think about the sentences and the tone and the rate of speed with which you use them. Because for me personally, I'm a bit this, and there are some things that I say that I don't intentionally mean. Like, wow, that was really harsh, and I'm like, that's dangerous,
Yeah, it is.
right?
I want to jump in there real quickly too, because I remember when you apply for college jobs, you typically record yourself and you have to submit rehearsal video.
Okay.
And I didn't do that when I was teaching high school, and I don't know that many high school directors probably do it. But I think I would encourage it, because I watched video even in the last like couple of months. I was looking at some video, and I asked, I try to create the same kind of environment of like students feel empowered to say what they say. And I asked a question. I had an answer in my head. I asked the student provided feedback, and I didn't provide any kind of validation for what they said because I already had the answer. And I was like, okay, that's one way. And then I went to my thing. And watching that video back, I was like, oh my God, I completely dropped the ball. Like, I opened up the space for the student to provide feedback, and we didn't have any follow through after that because my brain had already just went to the next thing of what I thought it was, what the real answer might have been. And it completely was like, I set up the type of environment that a student feels comfortable, but then I didn't actually support that environment by how I responded, which is,
and it could have been just one more step, because
right, exactly.
maybe the answer wasn't what you had, but then if you said, okay, explain that more.
Exactly. Tell me why you feel that way.
It could have been your answer. They just didn't know how to say it.
They didn't articulate it the same way. You're exactly spot on. So that's why I wanted to kind of jump in, because that video, I tell you, man, I think if we all videoed our rehearsals and just watched them. I used to audio record, but I was audio recording to count, like figure out what I had to fix in the rehearsal. Not so much what type of what type of culture did I create, and how were the students engaged?
And how much you talk versus they play.
Yeah. Yeah. Teresa and I are watching Ted Lasso for the 80th time, probably.
So good.
Last night was the dart scene.
It's such a good
which
episode.
Is such a, which is be curious,
I've been underestimated
not judgmental.
My whole life. Yeah,
be curious, not judgmental, which is a good place to bring that in. And one of our producers, Jessica, just mentioned that on our chat. So I want to throw that in there, but that's exactly right. We're trying to create a culture where students are curious and they're not in fear of judgment or the gotcha moment. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to in that space.
Yeah, and in a lot of their classes, we got to understand and validate music. A lot of their classes, they're told things like it's a lecture. They're here. We want them, just like you said, David, we want them to be curious. We want them to be challenged. And I think because we want them to feel, that's kind of the other thing. Because there's something that brings them back, right?
Right.
And so that dialogue of discussion of tonality, intonation, then that's leading to emotion. And then that's kind of leading to our independent musician. That's who we want, right?
Right.
But
that's funny.
Curiosity.
That's exactly right. And I'm curious that the independent musician was kind of the next direction that I wanted to go with our conversation. I'm curious, do you have like specific methods or something that you do to guide students toward becoming more independent musicians?
Yeah, I mean, some of it has to do with listening to different things. For number one, like we have a list of listen to these. If they're a trumpet player, listen to these trumpet players. Okay, but listen to these vocalists. And like there's a whole listening list that if they're really curious and want to know things, and I'm always shocked when they bring up other things. And man, you want to check out your students' playlist. Their playlist is usually more broad than you give them credit for. So I think creating that is that, and ideas that music is not like for the flute or the clarinet or the tuba or the percussion. It's not that much different. There's a level of maturity needed. And in order to get there, you have to hear great musicians regardless. We do a lot of stuff with our choir. So we do a choir and our top band, a cappella choir top band. I've done it every year for the last 20 some years. And when they can get in an environment and collaborate with something that's not their type instrument, a wind instrument, and a vocalist, oh my gosh, their minds are just blowing up, and they appreciate each other so much. So I think it comes down to those times that you can give them a different experience, or experience that's the next step. We take them to the Dallas Symphony. I love to get them out of school on a field trip. This isn't the topic. We took everybody. I said, hey, they're doing an open rehearsal. Can we take them? And they're like, sure. I said, good, because I already ordered the buses. So, expose them to, they'll go. You don't have to take them there. If you expose them to things, they're just going to do a lot of it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, Todd, just to change direction slightly, how do you incorporate student feedback and self-reflection into the rehearsal process?
So the student feedback, to be honest, I'm probably I haven't quantified that as much as in the moment. I think I got better at it the last couple of years. But the reflection of, where did we start? What frustrated you in the middle? And how did that make the outcome even more important? We got a great opportunity to perform in Carnegie Hall in March of last year, and it was the entire program, top band through fourth band, and it was a wonderful experience. And this is where you have to tell the kids, this is an amazing experience. They'll do the thing of, and you got to be careful, because you can do the thing too of, well, that phrase didn't go as we planned, or this didn't, like, you're in Carnegie Hall, like there's no such thing as a perfect performance. But after that, the reflection, because we had to get things ready really pretty quick, because it was beginning of March. And then their stories afterward were so moving and touching, and they all had them. Yeah. Like, they all had this experience, and it wasn't the plane ride or riding the subway, like that experience right there. And the reflection of, where did you start? What was something, and this is just easy, what was something that happened in the middle that frustrated you? Tell me about it. How did you get past it? And man, you'll open it up. Either it was something that I said, which is flattering, or something a peer said, or helped them with. There's so much stuff going behind the scenes. I have no idea what's going on most of the time. There's like, yeah, Matthew helped me with this lick, and I didn't think I was going to get it, and he just came out helping me, and then I got it, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm really bad about going to the next thing. And I've known that, and I've had to be intentional of, what's that reflection point, so that now we know, okay, we did this, we can do anything, or we can do whatever the next thing is. We want to go one step at a time.
Yeah, man, I love it. There's the thing I'm taking away from all of this, honestly, and one of the reasons when we were thinking about this topic and why I was like, well, Todd Dixon would be great for this, is because you have created, I've seen it, a culture where your students are happy. Like, I've seen them. They are happy making music. They are happy in the room. They like you. They like the experience they're getting from band, not just from a musical standpoint, from like a life standpoint. And so I want to maybe just go back to that for a second. What steps have you taken to cultivate like an actual sense of community and mutual respect, within your group?
Yeah, I think it came down to time. When I was teaching, when I was younger, we were on a block schedule. And so you had 90 minutes to make relationships, to do stuff, to mess up, to recover. You could do a lot in 90 minutes. when I went to Wiley 18 years ago, not 14, 18. I don't know
Was
where
it
we got
18?
that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know. I can't math.
I
It was
said 14
2007.
earlier, everyone. It was 18. It was my
That's probably
apologies.
because I had an old bio.
It was from your bio. So yeah.
Right. I don't know where it is.
It's all good. Keep going.
This is me teaching, by the way. This is how it goes.
You're retired. It's all good.
Yeah.
And you live in the woods. For people that are
I
listening,
have no idea
behind
what to
him
do
is this
these days.
beautiful. It's crazy. Do you want me to repeat the question? No, I'm sorry.
This
It
can
was
be
my
edited,
fault.
right?
It
Okay.
can be. We'll probably leave this in though.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So when I realized the difference between teaching on 90 minutes to teaching on 50 minutes, I was a really bad teacher. And I had to realize, now it does help that my wife is she's a licensed professional counselor. So I'm feeling much better now. And so I had to realize, and she's great at helping me with it. I had to realize why I was so maybe different. I think the simplest term would be angry or upset. You know, like it was always just a struggle. And then I had to realize it's time. I don't have the time to build those relationships. I always loved knowing things about my kids, and it's just the time. And so I had to figure out how do I find the time? How do I redo what I've done in this amount of time into this amount of time? So then it became what's most important. And so then you have to kind of go, well, what is most important? Okay, to me, musically, the most important thing for me, for a young instrumentalist, is tone. Like if we can make a good sound, then we can do a lot of stuff, even if it's not technical. So I had to go, okay, I have to put my ego or whatever aside in order to get down to the simplest thing, which let's make a good sound, which they were making fine. But you know, you're always challenging yourself. But in that short amount of time, how can I be better pedagogy on there and involve them within the process? And I would like to say it was quick, but it wasn't. It was over a course of years that I finally stood back and go, okay, I think we're on to something. How are we doing it?
Right.
And I had a great principal at the time, and we would always be there early in the morning, Verdi Montgomery. And we would just be in his office, and he's one of these guys, like he is taught like for a really long time. And he said, it doesn't matter what test they're throwing at you. None of it matters. It's the teacher in the classroom and the kid. Okay.
That's it. Yep. So
now how can I lead all this? So then it became writing things down. Okay. Then it became the idea that as I was getting more organized in that time structure, I started to share my structure with the kids, and they were like, oh, I need that. So everything I was doing myself, I started sharing with the kids. AP kids in AP courses, dual credit classes. Like if you just show up to rehearsal and now start where you were and do the next couple measures, it's going to be awful. Really, it is. But if you say, here's our rehearsal calendar, and here's when you need to know these measures. And I've done that for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. It changed my life. I was happier because they had an idea of what was going on, right? Not a gotcha moment, right? So I kind of learned all this just by their reaction to me sharing what I was doing.
Right.
Like you're not holding on to information. So I think that's kind of how it evolved from something that you had all this time to do into something that had to be structured. And now we could kind of quantify what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we can repeat it with different groups all the time. I mean, y'all know that every band, like that band that you have right now, is only that band. And when you change personnel, that's a different group. So how do we maintain that consistency with another group and another group and another group and another group? And then you just base it on what your importance of music is and then your relationship with those kids, and again, everybody around you.
Sure.
It's interesting for anybody listening and self-assessing, going, I have got to steer the ship a little bit. Well, first of all, that's totally normal, and that's great, actually. But as Todd was saying, it's going to take some time, right, Todd? Like it took you a while to kind of steer that ship in a way, and I mean, it's a big ship to steer. So you empower the students as effectively as possible, care for them. I mean, it's so important, right? Which actually brings me to a question. So how do you ensure that the students take their skills and confidence that they have learned in your classroom and carry that over to their everyday lives? Because it's our job to teach them music, to teach them their instruments, those things. But that's only one little part, right? As teachers, we are teaching the entire student and the entire child. So how do you think about that?
Again, there's some intentionality with that. We, at the end of marching band, is a good one to do this with. I kind of add to it every year. It's usually around the same script, but taking a second and telling them what they did, how they did it, is really, really important. But just kind of going through the things that they learned. They learned time management. They learned that, there are some successes and there are some days that are not very successful. It's okay to be mad. You need to know why you're mad, and you need to talk to somebody. So we kind of go through all the things that they learned. The biggest one for me is that they learn forgiveness. This is huge no matter what line of work you're in. And it has to be taught. And this is one thing that I've been really big on and very intentional for a very long time, is forgiveness. Because we can forgive things in music, right? We can forgive that wrong note. We can forget, like, you don't have, I mean, how many times have you been in a rehearsal that somebody, like, something happened, something was wrong, somebody played a wrong note, and the director just gets furious? Okay, so now in that environment, we have just supported the idea that if you do something wrong, you get mad, right? So the idea that if that was wrong, there's mutual forgiveness from the group. Like, you didn't wake up this morning and mean to do that. So I have to forgive them. They have to forgive me. We have to, virtually hug it out, whatever. So yeah, I think that's the deal, is you have to let them know what they learned. They can't just leave your program going, I felt good about what I did. Well, what did you do, and why did you feel good about it, and how can you replicate that when you get out there?
I think the whole idea of, at least when I think about your teaching and kind of what we've talked about in the last hour or so, is the importance of building relationship. Like, you talk about forgiveness, what's really, these are things that keep relationships strong, is when you're investing in someone else and allowing for vulnerability. And in your culture, that's what exists. So it's, it's almost like it's a deep topic. Some of our topics on here, lighter. This is kind of a deep one. Of like, we're talking about some serious stuff here. And
well, I mean, how many times do we talk about the things that they're learning in our programs?
Right. So I want to ask you.
We have to be intentional about telling, like, see this thing, and we say we're teaching this thing. This is how this happened.
Yeah. So I want to ask you. So we've been talking about empowering students and creating this culture and all that. But what about you? How did all of this affect you as a teacher and as a human, as a person, having this environment compared to we've all been in some gotcha moments, and probably as younger teachers, we may have might have been created some of those.
I know we all have it. None of us want to admit to it, but that kid that we just ruined, we've taught so many kids, and I've got, like, every teacher has them. We don't want to admit to them, and it makes us feel bad inside. Like, it just breaks our heart. Like, the worst thing to me would be that somebody wouldn't want to continue on because of something I did. And it happened. And not just once. Like, I'm not perfect. I can't be. But the more I think as you mature, and when you have kids, your own kids, you mellow out just a little.
Yeah. I don't have kids, so I don't know. I'm still doing it the old way.
Still all feisty.
I'm still feisty. No, it's good. No, but I to your point, I think what we're really talking about as well as time. If you invest in this, and you've used this word multiple times today, if you're intentional, being intentional about the culture you would like to create, and then spending the time, investing the time to make it happen. Because there is some risk on the director's part too. Like, you have to figure that out. And you're probably, I'm saying this as I have, we will fail in trying to do that. But the end result is a rehearsal that literally everybody is engaged, invested, and enjoying the process. And the end result's also, I found to be quite musical.
It's very important, I think, for everybody listening to be honest with yourself. Do you have a plan? And it isn't just macroscopic. It isn't just microscopic. It's absolutely macroscopic here. Do you know the skills that you want your students to leave your program with? And if not, you're going to need to do some soul searching in a way, because it's critical to have that really clearly defined in your mind, because it isn't going to happen by accident. Or if it is, it's a coincidence, and it's not going to happen very often, right? So being very thoughtful about that. And, probably Todd, right? I mean, your staff, I mean, y'all would talk about this all the time. And I mean, very specifically, very intentionally, right?
Yeah. And I mean, everything we're talking about here might seem, up here, everything's written down. I mean, to the point, once we started going on this, and we did a clinic at TBA and some other places about this, we got the whole staff together from the middle school, high school, and it became, what do we, just a value system. And then with it, because none of us has a management course that we have to take in order to be the head of a program. And man, you don't know which way to come at it, right? And I'd done it like wrong. And then it became, okay, well, what can we all agree on? And man, once you hit that point where you're all agreeing on this thing, then, and everybody's valued, then the permission level that, hey, we're going to hold each other to this. And you do, and the kids benefit. And again,
so a result of that is actually more of an intrinsic accountability.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And you talked about how it feels when the kids are understanding all this. And yeah, I mean, that makes me feel awesome. It makes me feel proud because you see the light bulb in their eyes and the joy in their faces.
Right.
And I mean, that's just that's who I am. Like, there's so much wrong and bad in the world. If we can make some kids happy and feel empowered,
right, sure,
and they go out into the world, that's what we're sending. We're just getting them out there.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Todd, this has been serious, so we should probably jump to something that's a little lighter.
Good.
I feel like
By the way,
we probably should have had Aurora come on and talk to us through.
That's right.
This
Who is your favorite moderator, and why is it John Pasquale? We can start with
rolling your eyes in the other room now. By the way, listeners, all like the first season of this, y'all had 15 episodes or so.
Yeah.
Like, don't just listen to this one. Like, go listen to all of them, because it's the idea of knowledge of everybody who's been on this program, because you get one thing from one person, like, I'm just a big dummy. Like, go listen to, some of these other people that have been on. Oh my gosh, the Fettig one is great, and Richard Crane. I mean, just so. And then you got some pedagogues. Like, there's just so many great people. I'm so happy that y'all are doing this for people, and I just encourage everybody to listen through them, not just pick one. Because you're going to get stuff from everybody to have, like, you got to put stuff in your bag of tricks.
Thank you, Todd. We'll send you your check.
You. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
I just want a shirt. That's all.
Sure, I got you.
You think I've got it? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, so I'm curious. We asked two questions of everybody. Since you've listened, they're coming. Is there a book or books? It could be more than one that's particularly inspired you in your teaching journey.
Okay. I was ready for this one. Now, I am I am just not very smart. I just, all my time has always been, what's the next rehearsal? How can I, like, I've read some leadership stuff. One of the best books I ever read to help kids, and that made me go, oh, okay, is a book called How to Make First Chair. And I've bought about 15 copies of it, maybe 30. I don't have one. Every time I have it, I'm like given to it, hey, read this chapter, read this. And then I don't know who I gave it to, and so I buy another one. And I can't even remember who it's by right now off the top of my head. But How to Make First Chair, really great. And it goes into it. It's some life stuff, but it's really like, do these things on a daily basis. The biggest one, like increase the tempo 1 beat tomorrow. Like, that's simple. We can do that. So there you go.
Small steps.
It's an easy read.
Small steps. Atomic Habits. There's another book I'm going to throw in here that kind of goes along with some of this. That is, I know you're the guest and all, but it just popped in my head, which is The Art of Possibility by Ben Zander. I don't know if you've read that, but like the idea of shining eyes, that's when you said something about seeing their eyes in that pop, I was like, oh, that's just like Ben Zander. But kind of a recurring theme, I think, on almost every one of our podcasts has been someone saying to us, watch someone else teach, gain from somebody else, learn from what others are doing. And that's what the podcast is really about, is us learning from each other and sharing information. But that book just popped in my head, and I remember I'm going to reread it. I'm going to go find it, because after reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the way I want my students to be in rehearsal. And hearing him present it, and he co-wrote it with his wife, Rosalind, who also is a therapist, I believe, counselor, which it kind of all ties together. It's really about that culture, the culture. So in any case.
So Todd, for the ultimate question of our time today.
I was driving out going, I'm going to get them.
Yes, that's perfect.
But I'm going to do two things. I got you here. I love Common Time because as a conductor, you can do you can really feel free to do things on the podium.
Yeah. You never get lost.
I was raised, and everybody will think poorly of me now. My main instrument growing up was percussion, and I love playing drum set. So for drum set, I love playing some 7/8 across the 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. And Todd is a fantastic percussionist, fantastic percussionist. We could tell stories. That's not what this podcast is about, but he's a fantastic percussionist. But I can tell you, I've been friends with Todd for 30
since last century.
Since last century. And one of the most unique things I think about Todd is, as a percussionist, his knowledge of the wind instruments and figuring all those things out played into his success, as a director. But it wasn't just about just the instruments. It was the kids and learning more and constantly searching for knowledge. And when Todd was in high school and teaching throughout high school, I went a different direction, went to the collegiate world. And it's different in coming back and seeing you teach and hearing you and asking questions and kind of arguing a little bit sometimes. It helped me build this knowledge, but I was seeing you. This is kind of a unique perspective. I've been able to watch you grow for 30 years, and it's helped my own realization of things that I must do better. And that's kind of what this is kind of all about when we talk about it. So, hey, Todd, I am so thankful that you were on. You took some time to be with us today, and we'll wrap it up for today. But this has been one of the most, this is one I think I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to again, just to get all of that to sink in and go, okay, when you're on the podium, what's the culture that you are not only involved in, you're creating. Anyway.
Thanks, Todd.
Have a good one.
Good to see you, buddy. See you later.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Common Time Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we'd love it if you shared with your friends as well. We'll see you next time, but until then, keep making music and keep making a difference.